Of all the issues that people have at the TTRPG table, one that comes up all too often is metagaming. Before we talk about why metagaming is considered bad and how and why some people think it can be good, we should first understand what it is in this context. When it comes to games like D&D, metagaming is generally considered a player using knowledge or resources that their character would not have to solve challenges set out by the DM. The level 1 fighter who spent his whole life on a sheltered farm tells the rest of the party to not use poison damage against the imp because it's immune, despite the character having no way of knowing that yet. To use a very simplified comparison, it would be like someone doing an escape room that they've already done, and using their past experience to immediately find the key, rather than letting the other people in the escape room follow the clues and find it naturally. This can obviously ruin the fun for the other people there, and at worst, make doing the escape room at all pointless. That is a very surface level example, but like most things in D&D, metagaming can be a bit more complex than that. So, let's talk about it. Hi, my name's Cam, welcome to Rogue's Roll Call. I make videos about Dungeons and Dragons, so if that's your kind of thing, then I would love it if you stuck around. This is actually the first in a mini-series I want to do called D&D, where we will take the most talked about red flags in Dungeons and Dragons and have a closer look. The point here isn't just to say metagaming is bad. Don't do it. We are going to talk about how it can ruin games, but we're also going to have a look at the other side as well. Either way, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. So depending on who you talk to, everyone will have a different idea about what exactly counts as metagaming. You could have two people arguing about metagaming being bad, metagaming being good, but those two people could have a completely different idea of what actually constitutes metagaming. Thing is, it's kind of subjective, so it's possible that neither of those two people are wrong. It's also important to keep in mind that the thing with games like D&D is that it is impossible to completely remove what you know from what your character should know. If we have a player who is fighting an imp, and the player knows that that imp is immune to poison, but the character doesn't, I, as the DM, wouldn't expect them to try and do poison damage. The player knows that it's pointless and could risk them getting killed. That's an example of metagaming that is fine by me, but it's entirely possible that you wouldn't even consider that metagaming. However, say we have the same character, level 1 fighter, the character has never run into or even heard of an imp before, and this player tells all the other players that the imp is immune to poison, and those other players didn't know that. That is an example of metagaming that would be an issue for me, if that player's character had no way of knowing that. There is no official rule in the book about exactly how much metagaming is okay. At the end of the day, it comes down to what the people at the table are comfortable with. So, talk to them about it. Using the same example, a low-level party versus some imps. Don't forget, whether you're a player or a DM, you could make some rolls happen. Does the fighter know about the imp's immunities? Do some rolls. The fighter rolled a 19 or higher, maybe that fighter had a chat with a passing adventurer long ago, and that adventurer told them about these creatures, and now they can share some of that knowledge. Metagaming is going to happen in your D&D game. It just is. Players and DMs will always be influenced by knowledge that they already have when presented a challenge. But even with that in mind, I still think it's important to set boundaries at the table for what your group is okay with. Otherwise, challenges won't be challenges. There's no point. That's also not to mention that we already are kind of like metagaming, at least a little bit, every time we do something that our characters wouldn't necessarily do, which we do all the time just to keep things interesting or stick to the plot. If your DM puts a clear, important story encounter in front of your character, your barbarian could just walk away instead, but it would be a lot less interesting if you did, you know? So in one of my recent videos, I was looking through some forums and I saw this post. Now, I've heard a lot of good arguments in defense of metagaming. This is not one of them. Putting aside how condescending the entire tone of that post is, I have a particular issue with this line. Players should be able to use whatever they have available to gain an advantage over the DM. As much as D&D is a very subjective experience, I will still strongly oppose it's the players versus the DM mentality. I apologize, I don't know if the audio sounds bad right now, If it sounds fine, I guess you won't even be watching this short clip, but there is a massive storm that literally just started halfway through filming this, and I really want to finish the video, so hopefully the audio is fine. Even in combat encounters, a good DM shouldn't be setting out with the sole purpose of getting a TPK. That may be what the enemies want, that may be what happens, but the best DMs that I've ever played with have only ever acted on the enemy's intentions and motivations, as opposed to like some over-the-table rivalry between the DM and the players. Some of the best moments as a player is when your party is losing really hard, but you end up turning the tables, striking the finishing blow, and the DM celebrates with you. As a DM, I want my players to be challenged, and they could very well completely fail and lose. But I will be even more stoked if they win. Anyway, if you go into the game with the mindset to simply beat the DM and you use blatant metagaming to do it, you are going to ruin the fun for the other players, and you'll probably lose your DM entirely. I can't really imagine a DM who would put as much time and work into preparing a campaign as it takes just to have someone come to the table and then like metagame just to get one up on you. It can be like extremely demoralizing to spend a whole week planning the next session or longer, a session that you want to challenge and entertain your players, and then just have one of the players steamroll it because they have more experience or knowledge than you about D&D. It is much more impressive to me to see a veteran player let the other players learn and make mistakes than it is to see them like snatch the role of being a leader and then drag all the other players by the wrist through every other session. You can rein it in, that's all I'm saying. So when we talk about bad metagaming, we often focus on the players. That seems to be where it happens the most, or at least like if we're to refer to all of the like stories online. But DMs can absolutely be guilty of metagaming as well. Or I should say like they can be guilty of bad metagaming because the DM like role in D&D is kind of inherently a metagaming role. It may seem like I'm building up to a discussion about fudging dice rolls, but I'm not. I think if the DM fudges some rolls to make the encounter more challenging or more forgiving on the other side, whatever, that's fine. But as a note to DMs, I also think that fudging rolls, if you do that, should be done in extreme moderation. Sometimes it is just okay to have the players crush the big bad. Sometimes it's okay to let the players lose, have them face a bit of punishment for running in guns blazing. When it comes to DMs metagaming though, I'm referring to the act of having NPCs or enemies do things that they wouldn't do simply because the DM has inside knowledge on the players. I'll give you an example because I know this is starting to feel a bit convoluted. So the party are fighting a group of enemies, and the DM knows that one of the players is much more of a threat than the others, even though the enemies, the NPCs, don't. So then the DM focuses all of their heaviest hitting attacks on that player straight away to take them out of the fight. I think that's a really lame way of running an encounter. I just think it's much more fun and entertaining and interesting for the players to have the enemies learn during the fight how much of a threat that player is, and then they might adjust their strategy. If you do it that way, then that player who happens to be a larger threat is going to learn very quickly, and maybe even the hard way, that they can't just go in blasting, you know? They'll learn that they could make themselves a target. If you do it that way, it'll feel a lot more like the characters learned this about them rather than the DM did this deliberately to the player. Sometimes purposely putting aside that DM knowledge can be super rewarding for the players. I'll give you another example. Say that you have this shady NPC that is just acting kind of sketchy around the players, and then that NPC tries to charm one of the players. Now the DM knows that that player that this NPC just tried to charm is immune, but the NPC doesn't know that. So the charm doesn't work. The player character then gets this awesome moment where they can be like, did you really just try that on me? The player gets to feel like a badass. That's awesome. DMs will metagame. We kind of have to. DMs have a better idea than anyone else at the table what can and will or may happen, and it's inevitable that DMs will need to use that knowledge to keep the story moving forward. We could get into a whole conversation about railroading, but maybe in another D&D dilemma video, because that's a whole other thing. So ultimately, whether you think metagaming is a good thing, a bad thing, or somewhere in between, will probably come down to what you consider metagaming. And what you consider metagaming is going to be different from what other people consider metagaming. So I think in a lot of, like in most discussions like this, we could have two people arguing with each other, not realizing that they're both trying to make the same point. I personally think that metagaming is not only okay, but kind of unavoidable until it reaches a point where it is making challenges redundant, or it's stopping other players from making mistakes and learning the hard way. One of the best parts about D&D is learning stuff as a consequence to the actions and the choices that you make. So if there's like a veteran player at the table who's stopping you from making those actions and learning those lessons yourself, it's kind of lame. But hey, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts on metagaming in the comments below. Let me know what you think the next D&D Dilemmas video should be on, and if you want to see that, stick around. Thank you so much for watching, especially for watching through the whole video. It's very kind of you. As a reward, you can tell your DM that I said you can roll with advantage. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Catch ya.